So, President Trump has dinner plans tomorrow night with an unlikely group of table mates. For the first time in either of his two terms, Trump will attend the White House Correspondents Association annual dinner. It's a tradition dates back to 1921 that is intended to champion the First Amendment and press freedom. Let's bring in MS Now legal affairs reporter Fallon Gallagher, who has new analysis for MS.now titled, "Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? The Guy You'll See in Court." Fallon, take it away.
Yeah, Jonathan, it's really significant that the president's coming. We know that he's planning remarks. He's working with a comedian. We don't know what that's going to look like, whether he'll roast the press, whether he'll roast himself. But what we can expect is that this is probably going to be a pretty awkward dinner arrangement. And that is because the president is battling with the press corps in courtrooms, not spending time with them in dining rooms. And so, of course, there's always been tension between the president and the press corps. We saw that during Trump 1. We've been using the phrase fake news for over a decade now. But this is different because I'm looking at a lot of the litigation that's happening in Trump 2.0. I cover all of these cases very closely. And a big chunk of them can really be boiled down to the president versus the press. And so I looked at all of these cases, and they really fall into two categories. And the first is actions, often legal actions, that the president is taking to target journalists. Now, of course, a couple weeks ago in the briefing room when he was talking about that Iranian downed fighter jet, or sorry, the American downed fighter jet in Iran, he threatened to jail the journalist who first reported on that, to find the leaker there. That was a clear escalation in a fight that we've seen in recent weeks. Now, of course, there's also been lawsuits. He filed a defamation suit against the Wall Street Journal for its reporting that the president had penned a note in the Jeffrey Epstein birthday book that was coupled with a naked drawing of a woman. We later saw that birthday book, and there was a note that fit that description with the president's signature on it. So he sued them for defamation. A judge threw out that suit last week saying that the president hadn't met the actual malice standard that you need for defamation against public officials. But then most notably, the biggest attack that we've seen legally from the president and this administration towards the press was, of course, the indictment of journalists Don Lemon and Georgia Fort for their role in covering an anti-ICE protest in St. Paul, Minnesota. So that's one big chunk, and we're seeing a lot of cases like that. That's just a few of them. But then the other chunk is a series where the press is fighting back for systematic restrictions that this administration is taking against the press. Now, of course, there were those executive orders that defunded NPR and PBS. You saw both of those organizations fight back in court and get a judge to block that action, calling it unconstitutional. But you also saw the president's systematic dismantling of Voice America, which has been around since World War II to combat propaganda globally. And so a judge last month blocked that action. Of course, the administration is appealing that, and that'll go for argument soon. The other big one here, though, that we've been covering pretty extensively here at MS Now is the Pentagon press case. The administration over at the Pentagon instituted that new restrictive press policy, basically limiting the way that the press can actually operate, where they can go, whether or not they need an escort, but also what they can report. Of course, you'll remember that that first restrictive policy had limits on whether or not the press could publish information that was coming from anonymous sources. So that was really notable. The New York Times, of course, sued there, and a judge in a really scathing ruling blocked that action, ordered that the Pentagon needed to reinstate those press passes to all of those reporters who opted to turn in their press pass instead of sign on to that restrictive policy that the judge said violated the First Amendment. But all of these are the backdrop, and these cases are still ongoing as this president is set to go to dinner, which makes us wonder, maybe he's trying to view this as a sort of detente. Jonathan?
I'm going to go the other way on that. Fallon, I think that, first of all, it's a really important list. I'm glad you raised it. I think far more likely President Trump's going to take some sort of victory lap at this dinner, which I would argue a very problematic dinner. You just outlined part of the reasons why, indeed, he's filing a lawsuit against multiple news organizations. We should not forget that his administration conducted a raid of a Washington Post reporter's home, and this week we learned investigated a New York Times reporter. We know this president likes to insult and demean reporters all the time. We know that he has cut press access. You mentioned the Pentagon, also at the White House, reshaped the pool, kicked reporters out to portions of the West Wing. He has put the press attacks on the press at the center of his second campaign here. And Eugene Robinson, look, I'm a proud member of the White House Correspondents Association, which does incredible work, and the dinner does raise money for scholarships for journalists. we can do that another way. I think that this dinner, the time for this dinner expired, I would argue, long ago, and particularly this year, it is deeply fraught.
Yeah, I'm skipping all the events this weekend, and I would happily write a check to support the scholarship efforts, and I think a lot of members of the Washington Press Corps would also do the same. This just seems beyond awkward. There is this actual war going on between the free press, which is enshrined in the First Amendment, and this president. And it just strikes me as inappropriate, awkward, and I don't see what good is going to come from this. We'll see. Fallon, do we expect him to stick to the script? Last night tomorrow night he's having a comedian write jokes for him. I cannot remember a time when the president has stuck to the script. Do we think he'll do so tomorrow night?
I mean, like you said, this is a president who never sticks to the script. He always ad-libs, but this is also a speech that he's writing with jokes that he's working with a comedian on. I think what I'll be most looking for is whether or not these jokes are lighthearted or whether the roast is more on the attack end of the spectrum.
All right. Well, the new piece available online now at ms.now. MS Now legal affairs reporter Fallon Gallagher. Thank you so much. And Ashley, final word to you on this, but it does seem to be sort of an incongruous celebration of the First Amendment with someone who is restricting press access repeatedly.
Absolutely. But can I leave on a positive note? Because I think this is very interesting. We have the two biggest parties this weekend are Grindr. It's the hardest ticket. They're doing their inaugural party. And the executive branch, which is the Trump sons who started this exclusive club. And both of those, it just shows you how polarizing D.C. is, because those are the hottest parties.
All right. Well, there we go. Ashley Davis, thank you so much. Eugene Robinson, great to see you, my friend. Thank you as well.